Hello and welcome to my channel. This is going to be my first tutorial, which I hope will be the first of many. I decided to make tutorials because I want to help people learn to draw the way that I did, which was through learning to see. I also want to show the many benefits there are of learning to draw this way. In this video, I am going to take you through one of my drawings, explaining all the stages and steps that I take. I am going to use a time-lapse video for this, but if you think a real-time video would be of more use, then please let me know in the comments. For my first tutorial, I decided to draw something that I love and something which I never get bored of drawing, which if you have a look at my Instagram account, you will see that I draw quite a lot of eyes. I should say that previously I have made 2 other videos that might be of interest, which I would recommend you go back and watch. The first video, How I Draw, My Advice for Improving Your Drawing Skills, gives an overview of how I draw and covers some of the techniques and processes that I mention here. The second video covers all the materials that I use or would recommend. As always, I will leave a link to everything that I am using in the description below. I will also leave a link to the reference image in case you would like to draw along with me, as well as links to a couple of online tools that I use to edit the image. So let's begin. The first thing I should mention is the paper that I am using, which is Strathmore Bristol paper with a vellum surface. There is a link to it in the description below and others that I recommend. I start by deciding where I am going to place the eye. As I have drawn an eye already, this will help determine where I place the second eye. If this was the first eye that I was going to draw, I would measure the eye, the space between the nose, and then the second eye. I would then use this measurement to help determine where to place it on the paper. I have drawn an eye already, so you can see the results of what I am going to show you. I use the first eye to help me determine where I am going to place the second eye. I do this by measuring a line from the top of the eye across the page, and then again from the bottom of the eye across the page. I start by outlining the drawing. I use a 2H pencil because it has a light tone which will not show through when I am putting in the tones. The lead is also hard, which will prevent it from smudging. I break my drawings down into 2 stages. The first stage is putting in the outlines, which is like the skeleton of the drawing, and the second stage is putting in the tones, which gives the drawing the realistic effect. My favourite way to draw is to use the hand follows the eye technique. As my eye follows all the edges in the reference image and works my way around the drawing, my hand and pencil are following my eyes. This can take some practice, and I would recommend taking your time and going slow. Eventually, this can be done in one continuous line and can almost become meditative. If you would like to know more about the hand follows the eye technique, then I would recommend Frederick Frank's book, The Zen of Seeing, Drawing as Meditation, which is where I first heard about this technique. I will leave a link in the description to any books that I mention. As my eyes follow the edges in the reference image, I will often glance back at my drawing to check the lines that I have just drawn. I am checking the lines' length and angle, comparing them to other lines within my drawing and reference image, using my hands and eyes to measure. I continually repeat this process as I work my way around the drawing. I do not just draw the edges of the object, but I also look for lines and shapes within the object. The shapes can also be the changes in tone. For highlights, I like to use the whiteness of the paper, so I mark these down to make sure that I do not go over them when I am putting in the tones. After I've put in all the outlines, I will then go back and look at the eye to make sure that I am happy with it. I will then check both eyes together, making sure that they look the same size and are equal distance apart. Drawing can sometimes be difficult because you are looking at what you think you see rather than what you actually see. One thing that can help with this is drawing the negative space. This is drawing the space around the object rather than drawing the actual object. Betty Edwards covers this in her book, The Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, which is another book that I would recommend. When I am putting in the outlines, I just stick to the basic shapes within the image rather than putting in any details. This is because they could easily be lost when I go over them with the tones. Okay, I'm going to speed up the video a bit. Once I am happy with the outlines, I start to put in the tones. I start by looking at the reference image and seeing which are the darkest areas, which are the midtones, and which are the lightest areas. Noting where the highlights are, as I like to keep these for the whiteness of the paper to show through. I like to start by drawing the focus point of the image, which in this case is the iris. I start by drawing the darkest areas first, but do not go in too dark to begin with. Here, I'm using a 4B pencil to outline the dark areas, using small circles to build up the tone. I then go back and put in the darkest areas using a black Faber-Castell Polychroma pencil crayon. I love using a pencil crayon because of the dark matte tones I am able to achieve. Through trial and error, I have found it is best to use the pencil first and then the pencil crayons. I cover this and why I prefer to use pencil crayons over softer pencils in my video about materials, which I will leave a link to in the description below. I continue to build up the dark areas, making sure that I leave the highlights. I use a 4B pencil to put in the darkest areas of the details. The details are created through tonal gradations, going from dark to light. I work my way through the pencils, going from 4B to 2B to HB, and then 2H for the lightest areas. I build up the tones using small circles. I then look over the drawing, checking the tones. I go back over any darker tones with the pencil crayon and lighten any tones with the rubber. Just like I was when I was putting in the outlines, I am continually checking my drawing against the reference image. Having the outline already drawn makes it easier when putting in the tones, as it allows you to mainly concentrate on getting the tonal gradations correct. After I've drawn the details of the iris, I move on to another section. Here I am drawing the details in the corner of the eye. Again, I'm using a 4B pencil to tone in the darker areas. I draw a bit and then compare it to what I have previously drawn, going back over it and making any adjustments. I am looking at the shape of the eye as a whole. I find with smaller drawings, tone is about emphasising form and shape. Whereas if this was a larger drawing, I would use tones to show texture and details. I then start shading the whites of the eyes. The whites of the eyes are not actually white, they contain reflective lights and many different tones. I am shading following the form. Shading like this emphasises the shape. I also draw in the little details as I come across them. Shading the whites of the eyes will give your drawing that extra realistic look. When drawing the whites of the eyes, they can sometimes appear a little bit dark. I would not be too concerned about this, as when you put in more darker tones, this will make the white appear brighter. When I have completed this section, I look over all the tones and add the final details. Looking back, if I was going to do this drawing again, I would not have added so much detail to the highlights, but rather have kept it whiter. After I've drawn the details of the eye, I start to look at the shape of the eye as a whole. I do this by drawing the top eyelid. I start by putting in the crease. I do not use a line, but rather I build it up using the small circles of tones. Lines do not actually exist in nature, so putting in lines is one of the easiest ways for your drawings to not look realistic. This is why I use a 2H pencil in the initial stages of outlining to make sure that it will not show through. As I draw, I continue to stop, look, check and adjust. I repeat this process as I work around the drawing in sections. I do seem to jump all over the place when I am drawing. 1 minute drawing this, then the next minute drawing something else. This is because I am still using the hand follows the eye technique and I am drawing what my eye is drawn to. I start to draw the bottom lid by putting in the details and building up the tones. I am really taking my time with this, taking my time looking and drawing, making sure that it looks accurate. Differences between tones can sometimes be very subtle. A tip that I was told to help with this was to squint your eyes. This reduces the details to their basic tones. I use this when I am looking at the reference image, but I also use this for when I am looking at my work. Here I am building up and adjusting the tones. I notice that the highlight isn't as white as I would like it to be, so I go back in and alter it. If I was going to do this again, I would make the highlight even brighter. Adding the bottom lip has helped the drawing look more realistic because it is drawn using changes in tones rather than using a line. I work my way around the drawing, building up the shape and drawing in the lids. I am drawing in the skin tones, making sure that I leave the highlights clear. I am not putting in any details because I plan to do this at the end. I start to draw the lashes using the black pencil crayon. I have already put in a solid black area of tone as this is how it looks on the reference image. I then draw each individual hair, building them up with small strokes. I recommend keeping your pencil sharp as this will improve your drawings by giving you precise lines. Again, I am using small strokes to build up each hair. Having the dark lashes drawn gives me something to compare the other tones to. I decide to go back in and build up the tone of the crease and some of the other tones in the drawing. Again, I continue to check and compare the tones in my drawing, adjusting them where need be. I continue to compare and adjust the tones in my drawing, either adding or taking away. I compare the tones in the eye that I have just drawn, and then I compare the eyes together. I am checking that the tones match and that the eyes are similar sizes. In drawing, I find that there is a lot of looking, adjusting and checking. I find that this is the best and the fastest way to improve your artistic eye. I then start to draw the bottom lashes. I place them by looking for markers in the reference image that I can then find in my drawing. In the video that I made about drawing materials, I mentioned that I use mechanical pencils. I use mechanical pencils for drawing really fine detail and textures. As this is a smaller drawing and I am just concerned with tones, I do not feel that I need to use the mechanical pencils here. I look at the first eye that I drew and notice that it looks larger. This is because it has more skin tones under the eyes, so I decide to go back in and work up the tones. I am not putting much detail in here. Again, this is because it is a smaller drawing. If I were to add texture, it would be too detailed and not very clear and take something away from my drawing. I continue to look and adjust the drawing where need be. In the past, I have overworked my drawings. It can sometimes be hard knowing when to stop. To help with this, I look at my drawings and try and see when the drawing looks correct. Finally, I use the pencil to measure both eyes, checking that they are the same size, and then again making any adjustments that are needed. One thing that I like to do, which I find helpful, is to look back over my drawing with fresh eyes and ask myself a couple of questions. I ask myself what I like about the drawing and what I would do differently next time. In this drawing, I like the contrast between the dark areas and the highlights. I also like the smooth gradation that I was able to achieve. Next time, I would make sure that I kept the highlights brighter. I also want to work on drawing eyelashes, as I feel I can achieve a much more natural look. I prefer the first eye drawn over the second eye. I find that when I am filming, I get nervous and this holds me back, which I think you can see in the drawing. This has shown me that I want to work on my confidence while I am filming a drawing. Lastly, I turn over my drawing and write the date. Doing this can help you see and keep track of your progress. This has been my first drawing tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. If you have any questions, then please leave them in the comments and I will get back to you. If you did like my video and would like more, then I would really appreciate it if you could please like, subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when I next post. Thank you for watching.